So, ladies and gentlemen, warmly welcome to this inspiring and knowledgeable and important day. Representatives from healthcare and from the art sector, the culture sector, all the different angles that you have to this interesting and important topic that we're going to deal with today. I'm Katarina Lindblad, and I'm a music therapist and a doctoral student at Örebro University. And I have some short practical things to tell you before we go on. This day is... I need my glasses. Shit. So, this conference is arranged by the Center for Culture and Arts in Healthcare, Stockholm County Council, within the Swedish chairmanship of the Nordic Council of Ministers. So it is really a Nordic gathering here. And some practical things. You see the emergency exits. There are 2 here and 1 up there. Fika, coffee will be served outside in the breaks. And for lunch, you will go directly out there to the right and then to the left. And then there is a big lunch restaurant. And what else? This entire day will be live streamed at Facebook. So if you want to put that out and tell those who are not here that they can watch us, you're welcome. Yeah, so let's start with the program. And it's my great honor and pleasure to introduce Anna Starbrink, Commissioner of Healthcare and Chair of the Healthcare Committee from the Liberal Party, who's worked many years with these topics from the political perspective to put healthcare, health and culture together. We need the political structures for that. And Karin Dahlman-Wright, Pro-Vice Chancellor for Karolinska Institutet, who's also engaged in putting Karolinska Institutet out there to reach out to society and to arts and humanities. So, welcome.
Thank you. Alltså jag sitter väl här till hon är klar. Good morning and very warm welcome to Stockholm and the County Council and the new hospital of Karolinska. Culture is, beside healthcare and public transport, one of the County Council's main responsibilities. And of course, personally, as a commissioner for both healthcare and culture, I find a connection between the two especially intriguing. I'm very excited and glad to welcome our Nordic neighbors to this event, and I hope that we can inspire to change and lead and learn from each other. It's my sincere belief that in order to take advantage of culture for health, we need to develop strategies for integrating culture in healthcare. It should not be seen as something separate, as only the domain of the culture sector. It should be the interest and responsibility of healthcare leaders, planners and politicians, of hospital directors, doctors, commissioners, and even government ministers. Culture exists first and foremost for and by itself. But we should definitely make use of the inherent good that culture can bring in other areas. That inherent good is not least palpable when it comes to health. We know that humans create culture expressions for their own joy and sorrow, to articulate, process, convey thoughts and feelings. And we know increasingly more about the positive medical effects, or call it side effects, if you will, of those cultural expressions. Not least if you're able to create and participate yourself in the song, dance, art. That's why we in Stockholm County Council work so much with culture integrated in our healthcare. from the happy clowns in the children's hospital to the calming, humanizing context in palliative care, as well as in the psychiatric care. And of course, the wonderful art pieces we have in our hospitals, for example, this beautiful wall. And that is why we strive to increase and to spread the knowledge regarding those positive medical effects. For example, we support the project The Cultural Brain, hosted by Karolinska Institutet, regarding the neurological importance of cultural expressions. For example, how music and movement in dance can make us mentally more fit and counteract the aging of the brain. Our new Center for Competence for Culture and Health in the County Council is an operation that I'm very proud of. There have to be many who feels the responsibility for spreading this experience and this knowledge. My combination of responsibility for healthcare and culture isn't just a happy coincidence due only to personal interest. I wouldn't mind having many colleagues. Perhaps even the Minister for Health should be somewhat a Minister of Culture, and vice versa. I hope you can learn from our experience, and share your own. And I hope that we together can put culture on the healthcare agenda. One agenda in particular would be the one of the Nordic cooperation. Perhaps something for Iceland in the upcoming presidency of the Nordic Council of Ministers. I wish you all a very pleasant, interesting, informative, and inspiring day where we can learn from each other. Once again, very warm welcome. And Karin.
So it's of course my great pleasure also to welcome you to this very, at the moment, creative area, as you can say. A lot of things are happening around here, and I think here Karolinska Institutet works very closely with both the hospital, Karolinska Hospital, but also with the whole county council with the ambition to improve human health. And of course here culture plays a role. So, Karolinska Institutet is over 200 years old. We have often told the history of how modest training of army surgeons eventually grow into a leading medical university. But I think if 200 years is a long or a short time really depends on the context. Culture, music, and visual arts, dancing, has existed so much longer. Homo sapiens is a creature of culture. Throughout history, music and other forms of culture have been important parts of human life. But it has long been viewed as a complement to our lives. The benefits of those activities has not been studied systematically, and only anecdotal pieces of information have been available about the consequences of human health and well-being. Systematic studies on how culture activities and performance may affect human health and well-being is an emerging research area, and actually a very attractive one. The best universities in the world are eager to engage in this subject. Karolinska Institutet is an international leading medical university, and as such we always want to be at the forefront. It is our mission to improve human health, and in doing so we must always strive to be better, always embrace new knowledge, and always be generous in sharing what we know with others. Engaging in cultural activities has never been a bad idea, but now that we can actually prove that it can have positive effects on the outcome of a range of disease treatments, the case for more cultures at all levels of society is even stronger. The strengths of cultural activities is that they are motivated, often inexpensive, in generally very accessible to the vast majority of the population. And unlike some more traditional treatments, the side effects are in generally purely positive. Another positive effect of this new research field is that it brings scientists, artists and musicians together. At KI, Karolinska Institutet, we are firm believers in the added value that can be created when different disciplines and perspectives can meet. I think today's symposium is a great example of that. Pediatric care and aging-related diseases, as well as mental health and rehabilitation, are among the first proven areas where culture has shown positive effects. But I think and hope this is just the beginning. We already know of positive health effects of arts, including the ability of music to reduce stress. Through such mechanisms, music can influence the outcome of our immune defense against infections, as well as of inflammation associated with, for example, cardiovascular disease, depression, and rheumatic disease. In the treatment of Alzheimer's disease and other forms of dementia, music and dancing can improve the communication ability of those affected and thus contribute to the improved quality of life. Due to recent development, it is now possible to make evidence-based statements like dancing slows the progression of Parkinson's disease, or listening to music enhances recovery after a stroke. It is truly remarkable how much progress has been made in a short period of time, and I am very excited to see what the next couple of years can bring us in terms of new groundbreaking discoveries. But culture is not one single entity. It comes in multiple flavors. The issue how we should view different culture domains has been discussed throughout centuries. What distinguishes music from visual arts, dancing from architecture, opera from poetry? We are talking about the treasure chest of potential here to apply in medicine. As a university, we are guardians with the responsibility to secure that newly introduced practices are based on evidence. We also have a responsibility that our research serves patients and the community. That is translational research. Translational research requires also physical proximity. The research is conducted close to the patient it's meant to serve. I think few places are better suited to this than Stockholm at the moment. The present, you have one, and the future bridges over Solna-Vägen here will be symbols and facilitators of the cooperation between Karolinska Institutet and the Karolinska Hospital. But translational research requires not only physical proximity, but also proximity between scientific disciplines. And this is particularly evident in relation to the topic of today's symposium, culture and health. We talk about interdisciplinary research. In this regard, Karolinska Institutet, as a medical university, is completely dependent on collaborations with other universities. And I'm very happy that such collaborations already are in place. I believe that the field, culture and health, can be instrumental in joining the two cultures, humanities and science. But of course, our common goal of improving people's health needs to include the whole society that we serve, and that it does not cease at professional, regional or national borders, and that's why it's so important that we all meet here today. It is not as a single isolated medical university, but only through cross-border collaboration that we together can contribute to improving people's health. I wish you all a day filled with interesting insights, as well as, I understand, stimulating cultural impressions. And again, very welcome to Stockholm.
Thank you, Karin and Anna. A very important start to this day. So, in Great Britain, the health potential of arts is promoted and taken seriously by the British Parliament. The next speaker, Alan Howarth, is a member of the House of Lords, and he started a parliamentary group on arts, health and well-being, an all-party parliament group in 2014. And he's also chairman of this group and joint chairman. And he's going to tell us about a report that they've put together with research and clinical examples from all the artistic fields and how they can meet major health challenges and save money. Ladies and gentlemen, Alan Howarth.
Is that okay? God morgon, mina damer och herrar. And you'll forgive me perhaps if I don't attempt to speak to you any further in Swedish. The happy circumstances is that all Nordic people speak perfect English, so that allows us Brits to be idle and lazy as linguists. Thank you, Katarina, for that introduction, and thank you both very much indeed. It's an enormous honor for me to be invited to participate in this conference and to be in this distinguished university. It's always a great delight to be in Stockholm, such a wonderful historic city, so much so that I thought I would come in person and not as a hologram. To us, across the North Sea, Sweden and the Nordic countries generally are a beacon of social democracy and of progressive social policy. We admire very much what you have done over the decades. And of course, social democracy is fairly beleaguered these days with the hurricane of technological change, global market forces, the aftermath of the global financial crisis of 2008. It is so much more difficult to maintain public policy that is imbued with the values of humanity and stability and relatedness. So it's a particular pleasure to be with you. We have a rich agenda today. We shall learn much about practice in the field of arts, health and well-being in the Nordic countries. To me, again, looking across at you, it's very important that the Nordic countries and Nordic governments acknowledge the importance of this field in clear terms. And undoubtedly, you are ahead of where we are in Britain in terms of strategic support at governmental level for culture and health. For example, we are aware of important longitudinal research studies on the impact of engagement with the arts on healthcare, and that you have been able to accumulate population-scale data sets. We noticed that the Swedish government has coordinated the work of the Ministries of Culture and Health. We noted that the Swedish Parliament, quite early on, back in 2007, I think, well ahead of us, established a cross-party society for culture and health. And I congratulate Stockholm County Council on having established the Centre for Arts and Culture in Healthcare, achieving collaboration between researchers, artists, healthcare professionals and patient organizations, and collaborating for research with the new Centre for Culture, Cognition and Health at the Karolinska Institute. The Finnish government has had a joint action program between the Ministries of Social Affairs and Health and of Education and Culture. The Norwegian government has established its Resource Centre for Arts, Health and Care, and in Denmark, municipalities are extensively committed to arts on prescription. So, viewed across the North Sea, through the Brexit fog that tends to isolate our island, what we can discern is most impressive. And we very much want to learn from you. Let me say a little bit about the background to the formation of the All-Party Parliamentary Group and the publication of our report, Creative Health. Between 1998 and 2001, I had the privilege to be Minister for the Arts in Britain, and in that capacity, I developed a dialogue between my department, the Culture Department, and the Department of Health. I knew much less in those days than I know now about the significance of culture for health. But even then, it seemed to me a no-brainer that the arts could help people to live healthier lives, and that the quest for better health would enable more people to have access to culture, and very importantly, more people from relatively disadvantaged backgrounds and circumstances. At that time, I received a positive response from my counterpart colleague, Minister in the Department of Health, and particularly from NHS Estates, National Health Service Estates, who were responsible for the hospital building programme. However, my colleague and I were both removed from office in the capricious way that occurs in politics, and that particular initiative that we had launched ran into the sand. There was then a brief revival of interest within the UK government in 2007, and the Arts Council of England, that's the body charged with providing funding for cultural institutions, and the Department of Health, together published a prospectus for arts and health. However, it was not well received in the media, particularly by the British tabloids, notably a newspaper called the Daily Mail, and some of the politicians retreated under that onslaught. In 2008, we had a major debate in the House of Lords, which I introduced, and the Secretary of State for Health at that time, Alan Johnson, made a magnificent speech which said everything that you would want the health minister to say. However, once again, there were ministerial changes and the initiative ran out of steam. Then we had a period of organizational upheaval and much controversy, legislation in 2012, called the Health and Social Care Act, and in all those circumstances, it didn't seem opportune to relaunch a campaign for the arts and health. However, by 2014, it seemed that the time was ripe to try again. Circumstances were now more favourable. National Health Service England had published in that year the 5-year forward view, which committed the Department of Health to a much more serious and consistent effort in preventative care. Now, the Brits are devoted to the principles of the National Health Service, essentially that good quality healthcare should be available to all, regardless of their background, and free at the point of use. It's a kind of national religion for us. It was indeed the centerpiece of the narrative of our national life that we staged at the opening ceremony of the Olympic Games in 2012. But at the same time, people were increasingly realizing that there could be no complacency about our capacity to sustain the National Health Service and the values of it. Costly new medications and technologies, the aging of the population, the increase in long-term conditions were all making it harder, and our economy was failing to generate the tax revenues to fund the need and the demand for healthcare. Austerity, the problem of repaying our excessive debts after the 2008 crisis, made the economic struggle to sustain the health service and social care yet harder. At the same time, more and more people were coming to see that obviously we couldn't simply carry on wrecking our health with our consumer lifestyles and expecting the health service somehow to patch us up. It was inescapable that Western societies needed a decisive turn towards healthier ways of living. And that David Cameron, who, as our Prime Minister, endorsed an initiative already taken by the Office of National Statistics in Britain to measure national well-being. And he established what was called the What Works Centre for Wellbeing in the Cabinet Office at the heart of our government. So all that was happening, and in 2014 it therefore seemed to me timely to try again to persuade decision makers in government and the medical establishment, that the arts have a truly important contribution to make to healthier and more fulfilling lives, to the creation of what we've come to call a healthy and health-creating society. The organization and the organizational and funding structures created by the 2012 legislation, whatever their merits and demerits, and it has all been very controversial, were capable of supporting the arts in health. And the new policy emphasis on public health was propitious. A further crucial factor was the new presence on the scene of the National Alliance for Arts, Health and Wellbeing, a representative organization of practitioners in this field drawn from across the English regions, founded in 2012. And with their advice and their support, in 2014, therefore, some of us founded the all-party parliamentary group on arts, health and well-being. And we have had about 50 parliamentarians in both houses of parliament and from a range of political parties involved in our work. We had a general election in 2015, which rather disrupted us, but we got ourselves going again. And in that year, we decided that we would conduct an inquiry with three purposes: to assess the state of arts in health. This had to be primarily in England, to respect the constitutional proprieties, because policy for both health and culture in Great Britain is devolved to Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland. So as Westminster parliamentarians, we had to place our emphasis primarily on what was happening in England, but we worked closely with colleagues in the devolved countries and drew many examples from what they're doing into our report. Our second purpose was to make concrete recommendations for action, and our third purpose was more broadly to stimulate progress in the field, even while waiting for government response. We were very, very fortunate that the National Alliance seconded to us Alex Coulter to be the project manager, and she has addressed this task with quite extraordinary creativity and energy and effectiveness. We were funded by two major philanthropic foundations, the Paul Hamlin Foundation and Welcome. They were not only generous in their financial support, but they took a searching and continuous interest in the work that we were doing, asked us some very good questions, gave us wise advice, and in that respect, they were model philanthropic funders. Our academic partners were the Special Interest Group for Arts, Health and Wellbeing of the Royal Society for Public Health and King's College London, and our practice partners were the Guy's and St Thomas's Charity, another very important philanthropic foundation, which is supporting innovative and very interesting work in parts of South London. We were also greatly assisted by an advisory group of distinguished experts. We held, during the inquiry, 16 round tables in Parliament. Themes of the round tables included music and health, museums and health, arts on prescription, arts and healthcare environments, place, environment and community, young people, mental health and the arts, arts and post-traumatic stress, arts and the criminal justice system, arts and dementia, arts and palliative care, dying and bereavement. These were some of the topics. There's a full list of the topics and the participants in our work at the back of the report. These roundtables generated some very exciting discussions, new insight, I believe, much mutual learning, new networks, energy, and a determination to transform the presence of art and culture in healthcare. Some 300 people took part in our roundtables from across the United Kingdom, and we greatly welcome the participation in two of our roundtables of Danish colleagues. I just saw Anita this morning, who joined us at our Arts on Prescription roundtable. So we had, participating in these roundtables, people from the health and social care professions, people from arts organizations, and of course artists themselves, academics, policymakers, decision makers, funders, commissioners, managers, and, most importantly, service users. The testimony of some of the service users was extraordinarily compelling and powerful. In a parliamentary committee room, you could have heard a pin drop when people were talking about the extraordinary benefits that they had received from the experience of arts in their healthcare. And I think it does raise an interesting question about the nature of evidence. This is not evidence on a statistical basis. It's hard to quantify, it's hard to demonstrate. If you haven't heard that individual testimony, you don't know what's being talked about. But it does seem to me to be very compelling and significant evidence. So the process of the round tables generated a shared commitment. It was a kind of co-production in which everyone's voice was of equal value, leading to a shared understanding. And in those parliamentary committee rooms, a picture began to emerge to which everyone had contributed and everyone owned. We challenged habitual thinking, and we pressed for new collaborations across conventional boundaries. In parallel with this process, our researcher, Dr. Rebecca Gordon-Nesbitt, did a major piece of desk-based research. She was based at King's College London and supported by the Arts and Humanities Research Council. Rebecca is here. She did, in my judgment, the most brilliant work for us. She drafted the report, and she will have the opportunity to talk to you somewhat later during the day, and she will join me also in responding to any questions, observations you may wish to make during the discussion. Rebecca drew, of course, from the material that the round tables have provided and from what we'd learnt in many other meetings that we'd held during this period, and from a call for evidence that we put out, to which 196 organizations or individuals who were practitioners responded. Based on that and much more, Rebecca drafted Creative Health, the Arts for Health and Wellbeing. It is, as you may know, a substantial document drawing together on an unprecedented scale evidence about the benefits of the arts to health and well-being. Our research material, Rebecca's research material, was predominantly derived from England, but of course also from our devolved countries in the United Kingdom, but to an extent internationally, and the international element was, within the international element, Nordic research, Nordic experience was certainly particularly significant, and we also learned a good deal from Australia. Our report, Creative Health, commences with discussions about the arts and the social determinants of health and of the evidence base, followed by chapters on the policy, commissioning and funding landscape and on place, environment and community. The structure of the report then follows the life course with chapters on the significance of arts and of the arts to health and well-being in childhood, adolescence and young adulthood, working age adulthood, older adulthood and end of life. We conclude with 10 specific recommendations and then a section on the next steps that we foresaw our group taking. We also, alongside the full report, published a short report with wonderful illustrations by the artist David Shrigley. Creative Health was launched in Parliament at Westminster on the 19th of July last year, and again a couple of days later in Manchester in the north of England at Manchester Metropolitan University. There are 3 key messages in the report. The arts can help keep us well, aid our recovery, and support longer lives better lived. The arts can help meet major challenges facing health and social care, including aging, long-term conditions, and mental health. The arts can help save money in the health service and social care. The report provides abundant evidence to support all 3 of those contentions. We were very gratified by the reception the report has had. There has been extensive and positive coverage of it, certainly in our national media and in the specialist media, even the Daily Mail, which had done so much damage a decade earlier. There's been a great deal of interest expressed internationally. I cannot tell you how encouraging it is for me to be invited to join you in this discussion, because it does tell us that some notice is being taken outside the boundaries of the United Kingdom of what the report has to say. It's even been translated into Japanese, and it has been reprinted, and Rebecca was thrilled at that because she was able to make one or two corrections which, as an academic, she felt were very important to put in. I have no illusions, however, that publication of the report means that our job has been done, that mission is accomplished. Many a worthy report has landed with a dull thud on official or professional desks and actually made remarkably little difference to the betterment of mankind. So there's a long way to go, I very well know, to mainstream the arts and culture in the healthcare orthodoxy, in the formulary, so to speak. Any doctor these days will tell you to consume 5 pieces a day of fruit and vegetables, maybe it's gone up to 10, and to take brisk walks. It's still a most unusual doctor who will advise you to benefit your mind and your body through art, or even to prescribe dancing to avert falls in old age, or singing to maintain your lungs in good order. There is as yet no training in relation to the arts in the public health syllabus in the United Kingdom. Medical humanities are still marginal in medical schools in the professional formation of young doctors. Despite the very considerable body of research evidence, much of it cited in creative health, the medical professions in Britain still largely ignore the potential of the arts and culture to benefit health. Professor Sir Michael Marmot, in his seminal reports for the World Health Organization and for the Government of the United Kingdom on the social determinants of health, arguing for stronger policies to prevent ill health, ignored the arts. When we met him, he acknowledged that this was an omission. It shouldn't have happened. And I understand now that he uses slides in his presentations which were prepared for him by Rebecca. So that is significant progress. Professor Sir Michael Marmot gave us an endorsement which is printed within the covers of Creative Health in the following terms. The mind is the gateway through which the social determinants impact upon health. And this report is about the life of the mind. It provides a substantial body of evidence showing how the arts, enriching the mind through creative and cultural activity, can mitigate the negative effects of social disadvantage. The social determinants of health are defined by the World Health Organization as the conditions in which people are born, grow, work, live, and age, and the wider set of forces and systems shaping the conditions of daily life. Following the report of the World Health Organization's 2005 Commission on the Social Determinants of Health, and in a subsequent publication, Fair Society, Healthy Lives, the Marmot Review, commissioned by the Health Secretary in the United Kingdom and published in 2010, Marmot again reported how health inequalities derive from the differential distribution of power, income, goods and services, including access to healthcare, education, good quality employment, good quality homes and communities. I'm sure this thinking has long been orthodox in the Nordic countries, but it's quite a radical challenge to neoliberal politicians. And yet, because of its demonstrable empirical validity, it is accepted, this analysis is accepted by the United Kingdom Department of Health and the National Health Service. And our APPG report, Creative Health, coming out in 2017, added to the analysis. We provided evidence that the arts and culture, overlooked hitherto in the analysis, can contribute significantly to each of the principal policy prescriptions that Marmot proposed for for tackling health inequalities. Let me say a word about terminology. For creative health, the arts covers the visual and performing arts, and in addition, crafts, literature, cooking, gardening, the common theme being personal creativity. The cultural field includes concert halls, galleries, heritage sites, libraries, museums, theatres. Places where engagement with the arts might take place include health and social care environments, community settings. We emphasise strongly in the report the importance for health and well-being of architecture, design, good planning, and a good environment. Marmot's first prescription was to give every child the best start in life, and of course the arts can help with this. Among participants in a programme called Be Creative, Be Well in deprived communities in London, 79% of those who engaged with the arts started to eat more healthily. Young mothers averted for their babies the lifetime consequences of maternal undernutrition. Maternal depression carries a long-term cost, it's estimated, of £8.1 billion for every annual cohort of births. The music and motherhood study, group singing, showed that group singing led to faster recovery from postnatal depression, and particularly so for mothers with severe depression, who recovered a month faster than the control groups, with a reduction in the stress hormone cortisol and better bonding with their babies. Research by Professor Susan Hall, who joined us at one of our round tables, shows that musical training improves the brain's early encoding of sound, leading to enhanced language development, literacy, and spatial reasoning, all essential for personal thriving. Marmot next advised, enable all children, young people, and adults to maximize their capabilities and have control over their lives. The Art Room is a national charity in Britain, a third sector organisation, offering therapeutic interventions for children and young people who find it difficult to engage with learning because of emotional and behavioural difficulties rooted in family circumstances, maltreatment, trauma, bereavement. Independent evaluation of the Art Room showed that the programme significantly reduced students' emotional and behavioural problems and increased their pro-social behaviours. Children who had clinical levels of difficulty at the outset evinced an 87.5% improvement in self-reported mood and self-esteem by the end of the programme. Research for the Prison Reform Trust shows significant benefits deriving from the arts and creative projects in terms of self-worth and the life skills of children in care and of young people tangled in the criminal justice system. In Camborne, in Cornwall, one of the most deprived communities in the United Kingdom, dance workshops for young people led to a 90% reduction in truancy from school, improvements in educational attainment and health, and a drop in disorder and youth crime. It's thought by people locally who have responsibility in this field that perhaps 10 young people a year have thereby been saved from being branded persistent young offenders with all the stigma and disadvantage associated with that. And yet I have to tell you, we are struggling in the United Kingdom to secure and consolidate the position of the arts in the national curriculum in our schools. The onset of psychosis is linked to social adversity. There is a higher incidence of psychosis among ethnic minority communities. The first episodes usually manifest in adolescence or early adulthood. The Alchemy Project, an early intervention in psychosis, run jointly by the South London and Maudsley Mental Health Trust and a dance organisation called Dance United, provided remarkable benefits for people in the 18 to 35-year-old age group diagnosed with psychosis. They were encouraged by health professionals to work with professional dancers. After only a few weeks, they reached a point, they formed troupes or groups of dancers. They reached a point where they were able to put on performances before an audience in a theatre. And clinically significant improvements were recorded in the communication, concentration, trust, in team working, relations with peers and their families, quality of life and well-being. A very promising experiment, you might think, but again, unfortunately, the funding for that initiative, for the Alchemy project, has not been renewed. Marmot called for fair employment and good work for all. He described health-damaging work as characterized by high demand with no control over the work task, by high effort and little reward, by social isolation at work, by job insecurity, by organizational injustice, and by shift work. Well, look at the features of today's labour market, in Britain anyway, an increasing number of people employed or hardly employed on 0 hours contracts, a growing precariat, growing in-work poverty. In the year 2015-2016 in the UK, 30 million working days were lost to illness and injury. The cost of that to the British economy is estimated at £100 billion, and £100 billion happens to be almost exactly the total budget of the National Health Service. The main health-related causes of absence from work are anxiety, stress and depression. Engagement with the arts operates powerfully to alleviate anxiety, stress and depression. Professor Carol Black, who reviewed health at work for the government, told us at a meeting of the all-party group that people she interviewed about their workplace experience said what they wanted was singing, dance classes and reading groups. Programs in the community provided as arts on prescription have led to significant progress in recovery from mental health problems. A participant in an arts on prescription project run by the charity Artlift in the county of Gloucestershire says, "I had split up from my partner, found myself without anywhere to live and couldn't see my children. I couldn't work as I wasn't physically able to do the job. He had had a stroke and wasn't in a position mentally or financially to start a building business again after going bankrupt. Since going to Artlift, I have had several exhibitions of my work around Gloucester. I find that painting in the style that I do, in a very expressionistic way, seems to help me emotionally. I no longer take any medication, and although I am not without problems, I find that as long as I can paint, I can cope. It doesn't mean that depression has gone, but I no longer have to keep going back to my doctor for more antidepressants. I just lock myself away and paint until I feel slightly better. I now mentor some people who have been through Artlift themselves, and they come and use my studio a couple of times a week to get together, paint, draw, and chat, and I can see the benefit to them." A cost-benefit analysis of Artlift's work carried out between 2009 and 2012 showed that after 6 months of working with an artist, people made 37% less demands on their for family doctor appointments, and hospital admissions dropped by 27%. It's estimated that in Britain 30% of appointments with family doctors are requested for psychosocial reasons, perhaps principally because of people's feelings of isolation. Well, if you multiply the benefits that I've just mentioned across the system as a whole, you can foresee really significant savings in public expenditure and really significant increases in personal well-being. Marmot said that we should ensure a healthy standard of living for all, create healthy and sustainable places and environments. Well, I'm sorry to have to tell you that we've had an increase in Britain in people coming to food banks to secure their nutrition. We are failing to build the new homes that are needed, and we're spending vast amounts of money treating the problems that arise for people in poor quality accommodation. Creative Homes, another charity, recognizes that the domestic environment is a major influence on the development of the child's brain. Working with families living in overcrowded conditions and therefore at particular risk of mental health problems, Creative Homes facilitates live arts experiences in the home. Trained artists, including storytellers, dancers, musicians, teach families skills to assist them cope with the stresses of daily life. An analysis of creative homes showed that where they had been doing their work, there was a 64% improvement in the quality of household routines, 23% increase in play at home, a 27% increase of singing with children. At the launch of the Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance, which has now succeeded the National Alliance, in Birmingham, the Choir with No Name, which is a choir of homeless people, which has been wonderfully organised by dedicated people, showed movingly how music can mitigate the hopelessness of homelessness and how the human spirit can resurge. A report commissioned by the King's Fund, a major health think tank in Britain, by the National Garden Scheme, found evidence that enjoyment of gardens and of gardening produced a range of positive impacts on health and well-being through the life course. Research shows that people who perceive their environment as beautiful enjoy better mental and physical health. And yet again, I'm sorry to say that in Britain we have weakened our planning regime, and planning has been significantly discredited in the public mind. Well, this brief selection of examples of practice of arts in health and research indicates clearly the all-party group contends that the arts should be embraced unequivocally in new preventative strategies to improve the health of our people. All the instances I've just now quoted to you described more fully in the report, Creative Health, and there are links there to the underlying research. The arts, of course, are not a panacea, and we're at pains not to overclaim. We don't want to exaggerate and thereby discredit the case that we're making. But we do believe that there are demonstrable benefits in terms of health and value for money. For example, falls are a main cause of emergency hospital admissions for old people and for people having to leave their own homes and move into long-term residential care. Old people's falls cost something like 2.3 billion in public expenditure in Britain every year. But there is evidence that healthy people, old people, still in good health, who spend an hour of dancing each week for 6 months, see improvements in their cognitive, tactile, and motor functioning. Dancing in Time, which is a falls prevention program in the city of Leeds, had an 85% adherence. People stayed with it, whereas the adherence rate for standard National Health Service falls prevention programs is only of the order of 40%. There are longitudinal studies here in Sweden, of course, and also in New York, that show that groups involved in creative artistic activity, painting, drawing, people attending cultural events, are protected for longer against the onset of dementia. Again, consider the benefit to health budgets and the benefit to health and well-being if the onset of dementia could be systematically delayed and if the opportunity that the arts provide for that were properly seized. It is, therefore, as I said before, a no-brainer that the arts have a really important contribution to make. But as yet, in my country, it's a small proportion of medical professionals who recognize that, or at any rate, act on the recognition that arts and culture can contribute importantly to good health. It's a huge opportunity, neglected. In the foreword to Creative Health, I speculated why that should be. Why is there this reluctance among medical professionals to seize the opportunity that's there for them? And I suggested that the factors included the almost exclusively science-based formation of medical professionals, a defensiveness and lack of imagination that occurs among medical professionals when they're very hard-pressed, when they're struggling from day to day to do their job. Conventional medical research criteria that favor large projects, RCT is the gold standard, but very often, almost always, in fact, not suitable, not effectively applicable to relatively small and diverse arts and health interventions. The bureaucratic character of the National Health Service, the big state-run healthcare system, commissioning methodologies that are more interested in volume, getting packages of help cheap, than in outcomes. And I have to say, a historic failure on the part of the proponents of arts in health to make their own case with sufficient academic rigor and sufficient confidence and insistence. Another factor is discontinuities in funding for arts in health. The funding comes and then it goes. And finally, a low priority that municipalities in Britain have tended to give to the arts. The barrier to the change that we need is, I believe, not legislative. It's not even to do with funding. It's to do with lack of understanding. And even those medics who do sense the potential of the arts in health may often find it difficult to inform themselves and find practical ways to engage. And on the other side of the house, many arts and culture professionals themselves have not yet embraced the health agenda. And one has to add that high-quality arts in health work is not straightforwardly replicable. It needs sensitivity, experience, skills of a high order, and true personal commitment. How then can we achieve the culture change that would enable the arts to take the place they should have in healthcare? In Creative Health, we made, as I said, 10 specific recommendations for policy. Together, if accepted and applied, they would create a coherent drive for change across the relevant sectors at all different levels and in a multitude of geographical, community, and organizational contexts. Our first recommendation is that leaders within the arts, health, and social care sectors, together with service users and academics, should establish a strategic centre at national level to support the advance of good practice, promote collaboration, coordinate and disseminate research, inform policy, support delivery. Well, why do we need such a national strategic centre? Essentially, to raise the whole game. The arts in health enterprise is fragile and vulnerable. There are many wonderful initiatives, much really excellent practice. They come, but then again, they go. They often don't last. The money runs out, key people move, new pressures and crises intervene. So effort and achievement are patchy and uneven across the country, brilliant in some places, but very little happening in others. There is in Britain no strong national voice for the arts in health. Every other healthcare discipline has its national level champion. So we need a national centre that would be a go-to organisation to represent the sector, to showcase the sector, to speak on behalf of the sector, to develop the narrative of the sector, to amplify its collective voice, to make sure that the voice is heard loud and clear, to speak to policymakers in government, in the medical establishment, to communicate with clinicians, commissioners, managers, patients, the media, the public, to support coherence across the country, to make sure that knowledge and ideas flow up, they flow down, they flow out, they flow around, to share experience of best practice, to develop skills, to support local co-production and delivery, to provide some sort of quality control, better underpinning of the endeavour with consistently high-quality evaluation, and to develop the perspectives and the vision through systematically developed research, to enhance training, all in all to demonstrate powerfully the effectiveness and the value for money of the arts in health, to make sure that there is a coherent use of the resources that are available, and of course to maintain international links so that we can continue to learn from each other across the world, and thus to take arts in health to a new level. What above all, I think, in Britain, such a centre would provide would be to unify the arts and cultural sector with the health and social care sectors. Arts and Health has the Culture, Health and Wellbeing Alliance, successor to the National Alliance. They have advanced the cause of arts and health very significantly, but they are grounded in the cultural sector. They are funded by the Arts Council of England, and there has not been equal buy-in from the health and social care sectors. So we do not have a combined strategy for arts in health. And it's that broadening and integration of effort that would be the most important value added by a national strategic centre. The timing now feels right, and I think the opportunity is great. Now, we do not envisage that this centre should be superimposed from the top by government or anyone else. We believe that it should emerge out of discussion among practitioners, academics, and service users all across the country, who would then understand that this isn't a new organisation that's going to tell them what to do and impose new bureaucratic burdens and duties on them. On the contrary, it's an organisation there to support their mission, to support the passion they have in their work, and to enable a step change to take place in the role of arts and culture in the health of the nation. We have organised a programme of 9 regional conferences across Britain at which discussion is taking place about our various recommendations and certainly about the principles and the practicalities of a national strategic centre. And that is happening in these first 6 months of 2018. If, therefore, the All-Party Parliamentary Group receives a mandate from the 3 sectors, arts, health and social care, then we will do what we can to facilitate the creation of a new national strategic centre, including raising money to support its establishment and its operation. There are many complexities as we look at this challenge, at this opportunity. Perhaps the key challenge is to find leaders from the health and social care sectors who are willing to commit themselves personally, time and energy to help to create this centre and to secure recognition of the value of the arts in health among their fellow professionals. We have asked the King's Fund to carry out a feasibility study to examine more precisely the options for a national strategic centre, to consult extensively, gather views, see if we can develop a consensus as to what it ought to be like, crystallise the purpose of a national strategic centre, explore possible structures. Should it be concentrated in one place? Should it be distributed, networked, federal somehow? Should it be a physical centre in a building, or should it be virtual? Should it be a highly formalised organisation, or should it be a looser association? Should it be based in London, or should it be based elsewhere in the country? How would it connect with existing bodies already there in the sector? How would we ensure that work is not duplicated? What would be its representative function, and how would its structures enable that representation? What types of membership could there be? What would its relationship be with government and its agencies? What would be the links between the centre and practitioners on the ground dispersed all around the country? Would we need a regional tier? What sort of staffing would be needed? What secondments? What would be the process for establishing it and its legal status? What might it be called? We were thinking of a title, Creative Health Collaborative Centre. Does that sum it up appropriately? How would it be funded? What would be its early priorities? What would be the measures of success over the first 3, 5 or 10 years? Well, you have centres here in the Nordic countries. We need to learn from you and from others. We've set up a steering group to help us get this right. We will have the report from the King's Fund next month, and we will then go into conclave to try and draw some conclusions on this. What are we asking government to do? We've not called for new legislation. We've not called for reorganisation of the health service. For heaven's sake, nobody wants that again. We've not called for additional public expenditure for the arts in health, because that would be completely unrealistic. But we have recommended that key ministers, the Secretary of States for Culture, Health, Education, communities and local government lead a cross-governmental strategy to support the delivery of health and well-being through the arts and culture. We're examining and discussing cross-government strategies in other fields that are already being developed for sport and addressing the problem of loneliness. So we're urging the government, and particularly the National Health Service at national, regional and local level, to grasp the opportunity that the arts afford for the agendas they already have, for social and cultural inclusion and for better health and well-being. We do not want, however, government and the public and public agencies to control the agenda. We want them to support the sector and to support the National Strategic Centre. We will welcome government encouragement and help, of course, but the impetus needs to come from practitioners and the professions. Edicts and exhortations from government and government bureaucracies and hierarchies will not lead to the changes in habitual thinking that are needed, leading to change in habitual practice. In principle, the arts can be enlisted to support health within existing organizational and funding patterns. That happens too little now has to do with existing orthodoxies, lack of understanding, and vested interests that are not enthusiastic about change. So that is the culture change that we really need. I think I've spoken for long enough. We must leave time. I'm sorry I've spoken for a bit too long. There's much more that I could have said to you, but it would be better that you have the opportunity to offer your thoughts, and Rebecca and I will be very happy to try to respond to what you have to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this really clear and, you showed both the potential and the massive evidence and the complexity and the challenges. And I urge everyone here in this room to download and read this report. So when you will get flowers.
Oh, how very kind. Thank you. That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Good. Goodness.
And so we have some minutes for questions, and we have microphones here so that we can just run up to you, whoever is calling. Take the chance now, because this is so much of the experience that we need. It's interesting that you point out the Nordic countries and the achievements that we've done, whereas we say that, in Britain they have this report and they have this fantastic group. Yeah. Questions?
I've silenced them. Oh, there is somebody.
Yes, there is one. You give her a microphone.
Hello, I'm Ulrika Florin from Mälardalen University, and I have a question. It's related to the finance of the artists' works in these groups, because I have seen, both in my own research and as in my early experience as an artist, that often are the artists providing these benefits to this situation, making change, making effort, making this. You have some figures about the benefits of the interaction with artists in different ways, but to my knowledge, they are not so well supported in terms of salary and so on. Can you say something about that?
I think it's a perennial problem. Artists have always struggled to make a living. A handful of artists make a splendid living, but it seems almost a random process whereby some prosper and many struggle to create the work that they want to make. And there's no easy answer to that. The Arts Council of England provides grants to support arts organisations. arts organizations may be contracted by the health service to deliver work for them. And on that basis, yes, artists will receive some funding and support for the limited periods during which the grants persist. But all too often, as I said, there's discontinuity in funding, and the poor artists, literally poor artists, find themselves having to look around again to see how they can subsist and pay for their mortgages and their groceries. So there isn't an easy answer at all. But I do think that if there was a much more widespread appreciation of the benefits of the arts to health and well-being, then through all sorts of different channels, more funding might come through to the arts. So I think there might be more support for artists that way, but it's very hard to envisage precisely how that would happen.
Thank you.
Yeah, you had questions there.
Hey, I'm representing Swedish National Agency of Employment, Culture and Media. And then I have a background as an art historian, so I know what you are talking about. And my question is, despite all that research that you are talking about, and we know by ourselves that there are a lot of research about that it's helping people out of difficult situations and so on. And I think that despite all that research, art and culture hasn't the place that it deserves in the society. I think it's unconscious in somewhere. It has a placement as a hobby. It is not taken as serious as it should, and that's why I think we have to start in the ground level, and in kind of practitioners that we have to show more how to say deeply that it helps. And in that terms, for example, our department, Culture and Media, started in kind of, we have thinking to start in kind of courses with internships with different employers to show that it helps people out of that difficult situations in their lives. And my recommendation is that maybe instead of starting national agencies and so on, start locally. You have to show physically that it helps.
Well, different countries historically have had different traditions in terms of their recognition of the importance of the arts and how the arts are supported. In France, successive rulers of France have always sought to gild their regime in la civilisation française, whereas in Britain we're quite unpretentious and modest about art. The President of France lives in the Élysée. The Prime Minister of Britain lives in a modest townhouse at number 10 Downing Street. And it was only just after the war that the Arts Council of England was founded, and its funding remains minimal. So that it's a tradition of, as it were, allowing artists and art to find their place by themselves, not strongly supported by government patronage. However, I think new opportunities do open up with the research and the findings, the evidence of the significant potential of the arts to contribute to health and well-being. And if we do establish the National Strategic Centre that I was talking about, and if it does succeed in speaking on behalf of the arts and health sector, loud and clear so that its voice is heard by the public and by official policymakers, maybe that will start to make a difference. And we've also recommended in the report that art schools should include modules for their students on the possibilities of working in the health field, the health and social care field. So I think that the project that all of us here are deeply interested in does open up new possibilities to establish the arts more strongly. Rebecca, do you want to add? You don't, she doesn't have a microphone. Yes. Yes.
You had a mic.
Yeah. Rebecca makes the point that there is now a considerable drive to develop place-based strategies. For example, in Greater Manchester, where we have a new form of devolution of governmental power and resources, there is a bringing together of arts and of health and social care, which have been separate sectors, separately funded, separate bureaucracies and accountabilities. There's a new freedom in Greater Manchester to take advantage of the opportunity to merge those two sectors, and the people who are driving that process, the politicians and the administrators, are making sure that culture is brought into the process as well. So that too will help to establish culture more strongly, both in public recognition and in its practical ability to contribute to social betterment.
So, well, a short one then. You give him a mic.
So I'm Gunnar Björkstedt from the Karolinska Institute. You haven't mentioned Department of Education. Do you have some kind of contact with them? Because it's also important school.
Yeah. I was asked what our engagement is with the Department of Education in the United Kingdom. Well, it's very important. In our recommendation for the cross-governmental strategy, we have particularly mentioned the role that the Department of Education should have. I also mentioned that for some extraordinary reason, in recent times, I think this is indefensible, in recent times, the arts have been rather marginalized in the national curriculum. And this is ridiculous, given all that we know about the importance of creativity, both for personal health and well-being, and for economic success. It's crazy. So we're joining a broader campaign to get the arts strongly reinstated in the national curriculum. But that department also has responsibility for research funding. The Department of Health has a very big research budget, but the main funding programs for the research councils in Britain are based in the Department of Education as the sponsor. And what happens in art schools, for example, and all of that, the Education Department has a big part to play, and we will not accept that it's diffident and shy and withdrawn from this process.
So this discussion will go on.